I thought it would be necessary to give one last update on Clara. Judging based on my choice of words here, this video isn't going to be a happy one. And to be honest, there isn't any good news. For quite some time here, all of these standard characters have been getting replaced by more premium releases or limited characters. One character of course being the exception to the rule for now, and Clara finally becoming a side grade once and for all. This video is sponsored by Loot Bar. Thanks to Loot Bar, I'm able to play with Yunli in today's video. I was able to save on Stellar Jades with the cheaper prices they have compared to the typical in-game top-up version. The process is very safe and simple as it takes cheapest conversion currency rate and then presents to you many discounted prices, which you can then use with various coupons to save on an even more amount of Stellar Jades. The transaction is smooth and simple. Enter your UID in the top right corner. Once you choose your preferred method of payment, you will within a matter of moments receive your purchased on shards, which you can then convert to Stellar Jades. One thing I like about Loot Bar is that you get the first time top up bonus for your Stellar Jades, which is a massive help when it comes to making the videos, because that means more pools for the rate up character. Check out the link in the description to save on your Stellar Jade purchases, and thanks again to Loot Bar for sponsoring this video. In the previous video, we mentioned that Clara was to see a nice rise in viability following the release of Robin. Robin was great for just about any character, but of those with a follow-up attack in their kit, Robin became best in slot with. Clara alongside Robin and Topaz would create an amazing follow-up eccentric team. I mean, a team like this for Clara was a dream come true, and it certainly brings back the old days where being a skill point positive damage dealer was a plus, not a negative, which is the case for Clara. This team would then go on to dominate any enemies that have physical weakness, whether that was in Memories of Chaos and or Pure Fiction. The only issue with being in a team alongside Robin is that you are heavily dependent on the enemy having your weakness type, because unlike Ruan Mei, there's no resistance penetration. So based on this circumstance, you would replace Clara with Dr. Ratio and vice versa, depending on what the enemy was weak to. But Clara was still to remain best for Pure Fiction because of her double source of AoE damage. We also learned that Clara, much like Jing, was to see a nice damage boost following the release of the Duran Planar set if you met the criteria in the passive. This meant you were shackled to Topaz's team, but in doing so would receive a massive damage boost from Topaz for your follow-up attacks that was additive with the follow-up attack boost that you received from the Duran Planar set. The final part of the passive would also grant critical damage to the wearer, which alongside Robin's critical damage given was to make up for the loss of not having Sparkle in the team party. This would then go on to become Clara's best team, because it also scaled further depending on the amount of investment you had in Topaz too, considering she was a damage dealer first and foremost. So overall, this was a great time to be a Clara main, or at least we thought. There would be a few enemies that actually dealt damage without directly attacking your team, which would account for around 80% of their moveset, give or take. This would mean that Clara had very short windows to deal follow-up attack damage that was also susceptible to RNG checks because of the taunt system and lack of links in the party, assuming you'd use Aventurine. Clara was known to have more theoretical uncapped damage because 5 enemies on the field could result in 5+ hits in the form of counterattacks. If those same enemies also had multiple attacks, that would account for even more chances to counterattack the enemy. Not only was the floors with these enemies a waste of cycles when you had Clara in the party, but they also could put Clara to sleep without ever having attack her as well. This would be a nightmare for a character with a high taunt value. So it was no shock that Clara, despite receiving 2 things in the form of performance boosters, was to see a huge decrease in usage because she was quite literally unplayable. So you're all familiar with Hoyo at this point, and we know exactly how they operate as a business, right? We could see the silver lining on the wall following the drip tease of Yunli way back when. Yunli being physical and destruction was a telltale. I mean, look at Serval and Jing back in 1.0. I know that was lesser of a good comparison, but with how much better Jing has aged overall compared to Serval, it made a lot of sense as to how one power crept the other. Anyways, back to Yunli. We were to finally receive information surrounding the character and her function as a damage dealer, and while her kit is quite literally a 6-star version of Clara, they did even try to make it less obvious. Yunli even has her grippers out like Clara, which shows they clearly know their down bad audience. So Yunli has a counterattack like Clara whenever hit by the enemies, while also having her own personal taunt effect. This taunt effect is similar to that of the Preservation Trailblazer. Yunli also deals damage with her ultimate unlike Clara, which makes her much more of a proactive character while keeping the reactive part of Clara's kit. So not only are you doing more damage in general because of the extra sources and the taunt that Yunli has in her kit, but you're also able to counterattack the enemy without being hit directly by said enemy, which is the fix to the proposed problem created for Clara. So to play devil's advocate, Clara is a character given for free, well, after reaching a certain point or period of playing the game. But there is many ways of obtaining the character unlike Yunli. We can also take into account that this is only one enemy type currently in the existing in-game that completely counters Clara. Well, the Swarm Disaster enemies have countered Clara ever since the introduction in 1.3, but we haven't seen them in the endgame for quite some time. The last Pure Fiction stage would feature these Swarm Disaster bugs that would completely mess up a team of Clara, as they didn't directly hit you, but can still CC you like the previously mentioned mobs. Guess who can deal with them? Yunli, but also Dr. Ratio too, considering their weakness type. So at this point, we might as well talk about the bonus perks of Clara 2.0. Yunli has a best in slot relic set on her debut. This relic set is to give a nice boost to the wearer while giving a further boost in critical rate. And lastly, a boost in ultimate damage after doing a follow-up attack on the enemy. Considering Yunli does damage with her ultimate, she is to get a considerable boost in damage with this new set, because her ultimate centered follow-up attacks scaled on both follow-up attack and ultimate damage. The first of any character really. It doesn't end there, because while Clara has an enhanced follow-up attack after using her ultimate, Yunli has an enhanced follow-up from her ultimate state that gives a massive damage boost difference with his massive multiplier and additional hits. So the best way to sum up the design philosophy of Yunli is just literally way more damage than Clara. It's not even close. So there is a perk of having both Clara and Yunli in a team with each other, and that is due to the kit of Yunli. You don't want allies to take a turn after you use your ultimate, as that disables the state of Yunli early, so a character like Clara with a slow base speed doesn't sound like a bad idea. This is even more apparent with the existence of Robin, as she also doesn't take a turn after using her ultimate. Now, the further saving grace of this is that enemies in the hardest contents nowadays have high speed stats, which means they'll constantly take turns and even lap your Yunli and Clara, which is great. Let's also not forget that both can stack the Duran planar set with each other in the team party, doing follow-up attacks. And utilization of Robin for both of them is great, with the buff being for 2 allies instead of 1, much like Ruan Mei. You can also use Robin with Planetary Rendezvous for even further damage boosting if the physical characters are present in the team, which gives a further boost to Robin's own personal damage and the team as well. Ideally, the release of Yunli can indicate a buff for Clara with the limited lightcone of Yunli, which makes a lot of sense when you factor how identical the characters really are. However, this lightcone is mainly used for the boost and taunt values. For Clara, that's massive, especially in a team alongside Aventurine, but this also means dropping her standard lightcone, which is already amazing on the character in general. So overall, Clara is to see a quality of life buff, but not enough in my opinion to call this the saving of Clara as a character when the literal user of this is already a better version of Clara to begin with. So to be brutally honest, this definitely reminds me of the Bronya situation in pre and post Sparkle. It was a time period in which the usage of Bronya was to see a heavy decrease after the release of an all-round better version of the character was released. Nowadays, her usage is pretty much tied to Jinglu, and while it doesn't compare well to Clara, who isn't even a support to begin with, so what I'm trying to say is that Clara will see a heavy decrease in usage, as if hers was anything high at this point with the constant release of strong damage dealers. It's also important to keep in mind that the game has continued to change and the mobs we fight are different than what they used to be. So eventually older characters become outclassed. And after all, the average player is just going to use the best option available known as the meta, which is no longer Clara. Thank you for watching and have a nice rest of your day.